How are you?
Hey, how are you? I'm in tank top and you're in sweater.
Yeah, it's actually this is our first signs of fall slash winter. So I'm
Nice.
on day two with less sun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that kind of stinks that part because I remember seeing something where the sun was beautiful when you were outside and the sun was beautiful and I thought, oh, she's probably loving it. That was the nice. It's really cloudy in Florida too. Like it's just been rainy and cloudy for like a month straight, it feels like. So
Hmm. But cool enough or warm enough for you to wear tank top.
yeah. Yeah, I mean it's humid. It's the South, but it is
Yeah.
like not as that that's the nice part about Arizona, right? The sun just is always your friend. Saying I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah, there will be some travel coming up soon.
Yeah,
That's
I know.
kind
I
of
thought you
the
said that you made your kind of plan, right? Is to start traveling more in the winter.
yeah, it's kind of the opposite of Arizona where you want to
Yeah.
save your travel
Hmm.
for summer. It's
Summer.
like
Yeah.
save our travel for winter.
Hmm.
So yeah, well, beautiful. I'm glad that we're here and it's good to see you. And I'm just kind of tuning in to like where in the world do we want to dive in? And and we're just reflecting, like I
Yeah.
kind of lost track of time, but you and I've had a long relationship, and so several iterations of
Uh-huh.
working together. And also, just like a little bit of context, I was writing just before this about, art and the creative process, and obviously what that has to do with business and life and love and all the things. And it just makes perfect sense that you would get to experience so many iterations
Uh-huh.
of, my bodies of work. And
Yeah.
so my brain translates that almost like, oh, Amber's been to all the art shows, right? Like,
Yeah.
when I came back from Africa and like I did a few different art shows, it's like every art show has a different energy to it, a different feeling, a different kind of theme, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's just how my brain is kind of organizing and
Yeah, no, that makes
categorizing.
sense. It is true. It is like because I think too when I heard of you, but I didn't know you yet. I don't think you were doing coaching. I think you were just a therapist, right? Or yeah, no, I'm pretty sure you were not doing coaching. And I heard of this art therapist in Phoenix, right? And like there was like an immediate peak, but of course, that peak didn't kind of come into fruition until you were coaching. And then, like, again, I met you at a conference
Mhm.
versus me reaching out per se for the coaching, but just like, oh, like, so yeah, it's neat. I've
Yeah.
like literally seen all the different iterations of you.
Yeah. of, of me and my business and my work. And yeah,
Yeah.
so that feels important in a sense to name that there's
Yeah.
kind of like these different experiences that you've had. And and then from there, like us really getting to co-create this conversation of which aspects, which shows, which art experiences do we really want to speak to here? And it may be a blend, right? It may
Yeah.
be like a little sample of all, but I wanted to check in with you to kind of see and feel what feels true and alive to talk about in terms of your experiences of working with me and what has shifted the most in your life and anything else that we want to get
Yeah.
into.
Well, I think I just want to name, as we say that, my value of long-term work with one person because of what you see like together. So you saw a history of blind spots and things that start making sense later that were perhaps evident, in the beginning, and vice versa. Not that I was looking at your blind spots as your client, but seeing, I think because we both come from this background, right? The way the relationship would unfold makes a lot more sense to me in longer term relationships versus um I have a problem and I want to work on this one kind of goal. So like, I think I went in being like, I'm going to get to know this woman named Lainey. And if there's a good fit, right, I'm open to see like where that goes. And I think that's the kind of work that interests me. And I really enjoy being a client that way too. Just even when I've, psychoanalytic kind of supervision and all that, this idea of like, it gets deeper and deeper and you see more and more things and you're connecting all these dots. And that's something that you don't always get with short-term relationships.
Absolutely.
I just really enjoy that I've known you for such a long time.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for that. And ditto. And for anybody watching this replay, when you say, forget how you said it, but you said this type of work, I just want to define that what you mean by this type of work, or you said our background. This background is that we've both been therapists and come from that depth kind of oriented relational development and transformation that's really integral. The relationship is integral to the growth. And I don't think that that's completely foreign in coaching and different types of therapy. However, depending on the person, whoever the person, coaching and leading is, if that's not a super high value for them, then they're not going to bring as much of that relational aspect to it. And I've definitely experienced many, many containers where that's not a value. And it's just a very different type of work. And to your point, it's like very outcome focused and results focused. And the difference here is that you were still getting outcomes and results and new types of experiences, but it's not where that's the only focus, because it's two parts. It's the outer goal of intention and creation, but it's this deeper inner focus that is very supported when the relationship is solid. And so we're able to kind of work on any trust issues if the relationship is feeling sticky or bumpy, or like the outer creations are going to get stalled when trust is lacking. So we get to work on the trust together within the context of intimacy and relationship.
Yeah, exactly. And I do agree. Like, I think, like, I can see, I think I always knew that, strategy has its place, of course. And perhaps there was a part of me that trusted some of my, strategies in the past. And because I felt a bit of dissatisfaction with maybe what all my outcomes were that were good, they weren't unimpressive, but there was a sense of, there's something more, right? And that was, when you say the word trust too, it is that like deep trust that you feel, and you feel when there are moments of not in relational work, right? And so like all of you is welcome here. And when you feel like you don't feel that way, either the client, what would be the client who doesn't feel that way, that sense of like, okay, I can bring up that I'm not even feeling that, right? Like, I'm not even feeling, I can say, but I can tell that's part of my stuff, which is the stuff we're working on, right? So the beauty of it all is like, it's just, it's beautiful. To me, it's just going all into deeper exploration is just the stuff that, like turns me on, right? Versus just a strategy-based work. And, I knew that was part of your values. So that was the interest.
Yeah. And what I hear you saying, making sure my AirPods are working. Sometimes I put my AirPods in and then the volume's actually still coming out of the computer. And I'm like, why am I wearing these? So making sure they're working. So what I heard you say in that is the element of working on trust was super foundational for you to make some of the leaps that you've made. And what I also hear you saying is how it wouldn't work for you if you have put yourself in, let's say, a coaching program or container that's just focused on strategy, and there isn't any focus on like the inner trust, the somatic, the relationship, because you can do all the strategies in the world And if you're lacking that sense of solid trust foundation, then those strategies may or may not be very effective. And in my experience, they're not. Like
Yeah.
I've gone through seasons where I'm really struggling to trust my next creative endeavor. And it's like screaming in the void
Yeah.
when you're not yet in full conviction behind the thing, and
Hmm.
that's something that you feel at the bodily level, then
Yeah.
it creates a real lack of momentum in whatever it is you're creating, which brings us full circle to our very first year together, where
Okay.
you signed on for an annual package, and you signed on for an annual package to cultivate your creativity and your
Yes.
creative flow, and to bring more creativity to your client work
Uh-huh.
and all of these things. And in a sense, it was because you wanted to prevent burnout. You knew that there was
Yeah.
a strong connection, because I was
Hmm.
presenting it that way too at the conference. But what we didn't actually say, so this is kind of like at the unconscious level, was that I'm hiring you to trust myself to be more creative,
Yeah, of course.
because that
Yeah,
was
because
the
I
piece. Because
trusted all
otherwise,
the business stuff and I trusted this and I trusted that. But there was like, oh, there's this creative thing that's like calling to me. Like, and my whole life and always putting it on the back burner. Like, you got to do this instead and this, there's a lot of like functional stuff versus that more creative part and and wanting someone to witness me for it, right? For the trust.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
not just witnessing you, but guiding you, because
Yeah.
there were a lot of creative prompts and
Hmm.
activities and exercises and homeworks and all those
Yeah.
things that were allowing you to dip your toe into
Uh-huh.
what felt like way too big a pool, right? Because the creativity is like the biggest unknown. Like
Oh
I
yeah, for sure.
still have like 20 years later, it's longer than that, but I'm not going to sit here and count,
Yeah.
is I still have resistance. Even yesterday, when I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like get out my paints and I'm just gonna get into it. And I like couldn't find the right spot. And like I'm like starting to settle in, and then it starts raining on me. And it was like there was all these things because I wasn't fully settled. Whereas the day before, I was just in the grass, in the sun, in my finger paints, like it was
Yeah.
heaven. And
Uh-huh.
so it's like any practice, you're going to have different experiences, but you just keep showing up to the mat, right? Or to the
Yeah.
canvas
Hmm.
or to the relationship, like no matter what it is. And that's really what you're pointing to when you say all is welcome here.
Yes.
So I want to just talk a little bit about your journey, because it's such a beautiful one. Like, what happened as you started dipping your toes into this like scary pool of creativity? Because a lot did happen within
Yeah.
you and your business and your client work.
Yeah. So, and I met with you at the end of my first year of business, and I was doing well. And then I did even better the next year. And there was a lot of, like, when we say well, like business, outcomes really easily, working with ideal types of clients, but a lot of like not really saying what I really wanted. Which of course I laugh about because I talk about desire with clients and be like, I gotta keep those desires under bay. Can't get too wild with my desires.
Mm.
And and you kind of picked up on getting, not kind of, you picked up on me like already having success in like the brick and mortar and feeling a little like, that was my dream and I maybe want more. And you started letting me, not letting me, but you gave me room to just really talk about like bigger desires, and then a lot of me talking about like, but I can't because of, some of those bigger desires would be more visibility and this and that. And so the exploration of, the creative processes with that, like kept on showing me like more outside of the box, more of this is what I want. And then um when I'd be in my body and I'd be in those processes feeling really clear, and then like pulling away from it and going like falling back into the mind, which
Mhm,
felt like the
mhm.
safe place. And yeah, and
And at
so
the same time, while that was happening, the way I tend to think of it through little bit of psychodynamic, but it's like what they call rapprochement, where it's like
mhm,
you go, the kid goes and
yeah,
tests and then comes back. And then again, this is why the relational aspect is
yeah,
so big for, the clients that I attract and even the mentors that I desire. It's
yeah,
like you go out and test and then you come back
come
and then
back.
you go and test and then you
Yeah,
come back. And so you were doing that
yeah,
despite
yeah,
the fact that your mind might be freaking out. That's okay. Like
yeah,
anytime
yeah.
that
It
you
was doing
jump into
different things,
yeah.
definitely.
And so there was a lot in that first year, if I remember correctly, that in terms of timeline, where it's like you started doing creative activities with
Yeah,
clients. You started bringing more of you, like you and your
mhm,
authentic creative expression to the client conversations. I think you started doing groups,
I
like
did. Yeah,
creative
it just I
groups.
would like I have an idea. I'm just gonna go for it, right? Instead of um some of that again, a little bit of that kind of perfection and more perfection versus precision, where it was just like, well, can I, right? And just being like, yeah, this is a good idea. I want to do it, and really enjoying it a lot, like a lot more, right? And you know, we talk about this like money as medicine is one of the things that came up too, and so I'm doing well. I'm doing well without a website. I'm doing well without like it was just a referral based business, right? Um and making more money in less time, which was a part of my goal starting a business, but also like pretty magically, like it felt pretty nice, pretty easy to do it. And yet still some resistance and likely the sense of like there's more capacity, but maybe my body and my, stress responses need to kind of get bigger, right? This ability to really get resilient. And because there's that relational part, right? You and I looking at attachment and that stuff was all really helpful in creative ways of seeing like safety and security as a part of the priority and not necessarily being as uh, I think as I created more and more safety and security, which is what the goal was, right? Then being like, I can't keep on risking because then
Mm.
right? And but then what happened was that burnout started kicking in a bit because it was like I was trying to stifle. Like I
Yeah, it's like the
finally
same way.
achieved it.
Right. It's the same way people start to get anxiety and depression because they're
Yeah.
not moving on their true taste.
Yes.
You start to feel anxious because there's a lack of congruence. And
Hmm.
then if you push that down long enough, it turns into depression
Yeah.
because you're like not allowing yourself to grow, right? It's like a sweet little weed or flower trying to grow through the concrete cracks, and
Yeah.
something's like depressing
Pushing
it,
down.
pushing
Yeah.
it down. And so it was really beautiful to see how like you were already doing great in your first year of business, and then by year two, you're doing all this creative play.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
what it's funny, one of the things that I always remember is
Yeah.
you starting to wear
I do
more
too.
comfortable clothes
More
to
yoga
see
pants,
your
not just
clients.
jeans. Like I was
Yeah.
like, I wear jeans. Like I'm kind of cool. And then I was like, oh yeah, yoga would be even like yoga pants would be even more fun. Why am I not doing that?
Yeah, so you're literally becoming more comfortable in your own skin, like
Yeah.
letting yourself like ride these little creative edges, break these little
Hmm.
self-created rules. Well,
Hmm.
and not completely self-related
Yeah.
because of training and whatnot to
Training.
dress
Yeah.
professional, but allowing yourself to push these edges so that you can feel more creative, which was allowing you to simultaneously create new streams of income too. Because if
Yeah.
you
Hmm.
hadn't been doing the creative workshops or groups or whatever
Yeah.
you called it at that time, so that was so beautiful. And
Yeah.
then there was this other leg of the journey where you're like leaping, like there was a bigger leap because you
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
decide to go towards some of those bigger dreams, which meant
Yeah.
moving to greener areas, living in a different home,
Yeah.
starting to play with like this concept of breaking the therapy box
Uh-huh.
and kind of like letting yourself be more than just a therapist.
Yeah.
So do you want to speak to any of that and how that journey has served you?
Yeah, and so that was the part like where there was a little bit more of like a push, a burnout, a bit of like that's where I was wanting to head, and kind of wanting to stay safe because I did well, and 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 so like if I keep on the growth, then I'm gonna have some more of that like growing pains and being
Mm.
like, but I'm in my 40s, like I don't want any more, right? I don't want any more growing pains. I just want to
So in a
chill.
sense, there was this a little bit of ambivalence that
Sure,
creates like straddling the fence, which
straddling the
is
fence. Good word. Yeah,
a bit painful to the
a
crotch.
bit
Yeah.
painful to the crutch, and a bit of like again, so then seeing and then looking at my client work too, right? So if we think about transference and countertransference, this idea of like, oh, look at you, you're kind of doing a lot of this ambivalent stuff, you're capping yourself, you're doing a lot of things that you're talking about in client work, and so it starts getting more painful as you notice yourself doing behaviors that you're trying to support others with. And so
Mm.
then again, the incongruence is kind of kicking in. um and again, like safety and security is like,
And
oh,
just
triggering.
pause for just a second. For those watching the replay, transference and countertransference is very much technical terms for therapists and psychologists who are in that relational field and are watching how, their experience is mirroring the client experience and sometimes vice versa. And so when Amber's talking about being noticing where it's really uncomfortable because now your experience is so paralleled with the client that it's harder to see
Yes.
that, yeah, there's like a slight lack of integrity happening because you know that you want to be one step ahead of the client to guide them into the next step.
Yeah, exactly. And so and it's also beautiful, right? It shows you what you need to see, which broke into some grief. Like we talked a lot about, like there was definitely some grief. And the ultimate reason why I hired you a long time ago was like more freedom, right? So of course, the more you're caging your grief, the more you're not feeling that great with freedom. And kind of, again, there's an unconscious part. I'm not, I didn't think I had that, but just again, just which then increased my capacity, right? Because typically when you're working with humans in in feelings, you want to not be scared of your own,
Sure.
so that you can, again, one step ahead. I know that feeling enough that I'm not going to try to stop it coming into the room.
Yeah.
And I really noticed that there was a bit of a little bit of helplessness and fear that I never was really comfortable with, which sounds funny when you work in mental health, but just the 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 full spectrum of those, right? And so felt some of that about like, yeah, this is definitely some ego death is going to be occurring, which is on the other side feels, like there's something on the other side, but when you're in it, it's tough. So again, having support when I was in that,
Mm.
to me, is paramount because it can feel a bit or a lot, disconcerting when you're like, there's this bigger vision, there's this bigger soul call. I am gonna have, like, between this, if we're climbing a wall, right? I'm just thinking of rock climbing right now. Like you're looking for a little bit of that ledge. And so you do have to kind of hold a little move and at the same, or those leap ideas. um and it's growing pains because it's not something you've done yet, so it is helpful to have somebody who's like, I know the feeling of a leap.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, like, if we turn here and we turn there, it's going to be less painful and or more effective
Yeah,
versus staying here
hold,
too
wait.
long and kind of getting stuck in it. Yeah. Because the beautiful thing about what you're saying is I'm reminded there's the pain of avoidance and
Mm-hmm.
then there's the pain of growth.
Yep,
So
either
which
way.
one do we want to choose?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
like pain is part of life.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that we can get away from. We
Yeah,
definitely can suffer less by not
suffer less. Yeah.
resisting the pain. And so that's the part where I think I've had the pleasure and honor of witnessing you not avoid and resist your pain anymore,
Yeah.
because there is some um, maturation that happens
Yeah.
when we're like, you know what, I'm just going to face this shit versus like
Uh-huh.
try to run from and like, because you see people do this all the time where it's like, I'll deal with that later, right? Like I can just keep going, keep going, keep going. And then eventually it kind of catches up. And a lot of times it's usually in the health arena.
Help. Yeah.
So I love that, you have the courage, and that's
Uh-huh.
obviously one of your pillars of your
Yeah.
brand business. And
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to say marketing, we'll keep it brand and business, but it's
Sure.
like that courage aspect, right? And so you had the courage to keep facing yourself, keep facing yourself, and keep facing yourself. And one caveat that I want to add to that is that it's not just facing yourself through awareness, epiphany,
Hmm.
realization, emotional processing. There is
And
the
action.
facing yourself through action, because the action actually comes, or the healing rather, of
Hmm.
the parts that you may be grieving, etc. It's like the joy is the flip side of that grief, and the joy
Yeah.
comes through the action of witnessing yourself
Hmm.
more or less do hard things, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
so I got to watch you do that, and we started to talk about it in terms of, you start wearing different clothes, you start expressing more truth, you start leading
Yeah.
creative groups, which would have been terrifying to you
Uh-huh.
before. But there was this really big, deep desire that we didn't
Yeah. I
quite
got it.
unearth in that first year. Like you really wanted to be in your own writing, but it was
Oh, yeah.
safer. It was safer to lead other people. And I'm
Yes.
saying this in a like, I want to highlight this for everyone watching the replay. Um, a lot of times for the empath and the empathic soul, it's so much easier to
Yeah.
lead other people in the thing. This is like what we call shadow artists, where it's like, okay, so I can't quite do the thing myself, but I can teach what I most want to learn. And I will grow those muscles in the
Uh-huh.
process, right? So there's no shame in it. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah. No.
I've, taught art and creativity for decades. And yesterday I'm still freaking out on how to finger paint.
Figure.
like whatever. Life is life, right? But there was this deep, deep desire in you to write and to
Yeah.
to go back into a part of you that meant so much to you at a younger
Hmm.
version, like I think adolescence.
Yeah.
And yet you were just a little too scared to give it the devotion, the writing, the devotion that it wanted. And so, but you
It's true.
were again putting your feet in the water and being like, okay, well, I'm not there yet, but I'm going to lead this creativity group and I'm going
Yeah.
to bring art into this experience. And before we knew it, you were starting to write. So
Oh, yeah, definitely.
it wasn't necessarily in that year because you were busy doubling your income. And then the
Yeah.
next year, you were busy relocating and all kinds of things.
Uh-huh.
But, fast forward to now, you've
Yeah.
become a prolific writer.
Yeah, I haven't published as much, but it's so funny because I think part of it was also having to let go of some of the box, because I always was like, well, if I'm a therapist, am I going to have to write self-help? Ugh, I don't want to write self-help. And so there was a little bit of also shedding a lot of the kind of identity, so that there was a sense of I want to like write an opinion piece. I want to write, like, if it's a little memoir, if I want to, like, if I like some sense of like, I don't want to kind of have this like um not let my role lead my life, which is what I think I did a little bit more in the past, right? I let the role of like being a helper and a healer, and because I really did enjoy it, kind of drive more than where I wanted to be in the long run, which is a little bit more of like I am many things, and it's a beautiful skill that I was trained in, and it's a beautiful profession and discipline, and I don't want that to be my larger identity, right? So
Yeah.
just really more deconstruction of the identity, so that I did get some of that freedom, that like I'm not, that I'm really honoring that the multitudes inside of all of trying to honor that with clients, right? But also like really honoring it in me, that I am more than just. I think even in my website I say I was, the feeling was I was just this therapist, and I'm watching women like go after these bigger things, and I'm like, wait a minute now. Like I
Yeah,
think
you were
I'm good enough.
hungry.
Exactly.
You were hungry for more experience
Yeah.
than just being locked in the therapy box and
Yeah.
locked in
Yeah.
the therapy room. And it was beautiful to watch you expand that, even in the first year, expand it to,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to take this into the group form. I'm going to bring in
Yeah.
creativity. I'm going to let me be more of myself. And then fast forward sometime later, I don't remember the timeline, but you really started moving away from the hourly
Yeah.
and group model to start playing with coaching model.
Yeah. And some
And
containers. And I loved it. And then I was
yeah.
like, crap, I love this. Now I'm going to actually.
So why
And
don't you share some of your biggest wins from that
yeah,
season? Because I know we have many chapters, but that was a
sure.
really fun. I can kind of remember getting your messages and like
Yeah.
August comes to mind of
August,
like,
yeah, because I think I did we did like the unravel, I'm pretty sure.
mhm.
And then I just was like, I'm asking people for what I want and moving into these and like playing with price points that were big for me that like now I'm like, oh, it's really a low price for that, like a 2 week kind of journey, but it was big for me at that time. And then like, that was fun. Next. And then I like doubled that one.
So let's get
So there was
specific so
like
that
that kind
those
of,
who are
yeah,
watching kind of have a sense, because I know I've given examples from my life of where I went from like 150 an hour to my first $2,500 package or something. And
sure.
that feels big when we're doing it.
Totally.
Even if
Yeah.
you like sit down and get the calculator out and break down the hours, it's probably less, who knows? But in this way, like you did go from like that $300 an hour to
Yeah.
eventually doing these intensives and then bigger packages. So why don't you
Yeah.
share some of that?
Sure. Yeah, so I think the first thing I did was I played like with like a 1,500 like 2 weeks of like you have access to talk to me, which felt big, like real big. Like I'm I'm kind of expensive at an hourly rate, like, and there's not this like there's like commitment, but not the way you're allowing them to pay each visit. And I would have long-term work, but just so it was like $1,500. Like it was so scary to me. And then the person like we did great. Did you hear that voice? Like I got so
Yeah.
excited. We did so much fun stuff that I was like, how can I not offer this again? And like I think the next one I did maybe 2,000, and then it was like 3,000 for that, and I just saw killer changes pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Um, and then I
And of
think
course, that's a result of the deep work you had been doing,
yeah,
right? Like your clients get to move really fast when
yeah,
you are in that courage muscle because of the
yeah,
work you've been doing. So there's such a beautiful ripple effect when we as practitioners are doing our own work, right? And
yeah.
then our clients get that benefit.
And also really thing that I really liked, I think there's a part of me that enjoys some of the intensity that can occur if necessary, right? So of course you can still use your the part of you that's like, what's for the greater good, but there is a level of some movement that's I enjoyed more than just like the 50-minute model, right? And I was like, oh, this is so much more fun because sometimes there's a pause and sometimes it's a little bit more prolific. And like you said, you could break it down and be like, wait, did I just lose money? But the interest was really like heightened. And what you could see, and I just really enjoyed it. And then eventually I moved to offering, I think, a bigger package was like in the 10,000, my first 10,000. And then the largest one so far was a $36,000 one.
I think I remembered a 20K somewhere
That was
between
there was
10,
a
10
20,
and
yeah, a
36.
10,
Yeah.
a 20, a 36, and then and yeah, like having some immersions and then of course also moments of like, can I keep on doing this? Like this is, this a little bit of that too much kind of buying into like the doubt that can come in when you do hit those bigger transitions. And then also kind of with all that, so that was helpful for creating more space, which is what I really like. Again, I didn't work a lot of hours as a therapist, but there's like this very strong desire for space, which in the end was space for me to feel all of me instead of kind of getting,
And also there's just like how do I say this? The overarching theme because you did say that you wanted, more freedom, and
Yeah.
now this creative space allows for that sense of more freedom. But even beyond that, like the bigger theme here is that you were actually playing and creating in a way. It's like how you could play and create on the paper or canvas,
Mhm.
in year one, where you're like letting yourself dabble on the paper and like, oh my God,
Blindfolded.
this, yeah, blindfolded. Like, this is scary. I don't know what I'm doing. I can't see it, but I'm doing it
Am I
anyway.
doing it right? I think
Yeah.
I probably said that to you. Like, am I
Yeah.
doing this right?
So, like, this is an expressive arts prompt, if you will,
Yeah.
but now this, if we use this as the expressive arts prompt, is now over here. So
Yeah.
it's like these are the training wheels where you've
Hmm.
cultivated some courage on the canvas so
Yeah.
that your business is now way more, well, let me say that differently, way less threatening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you can use it as the canvas. You can move things around. You can like paint over this or paint over that. I used to do
Hmm.
hourly, now I'm doing yearly. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, there became this way of being where you're able to live more creatively versus just, a lot of times people think of art and creativity as crafts or doing something
Yeah.
on the paper, but this is a way of living now for
Hmm.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. Which
Yeah.
was like, to me, that's as good as it gets, right? It's not just an object. To me, it's, and so like in general, I like process and I like immersion, and so it's kind of an all in type of thing. I can't. I mean, I obviously can compartmentalize, but that compartmentalization was like, nope, that's not actually, that doesn't match my desire. It doesn't match kind of my worldview. And so it was really, again, not discounting all the ways that I was trained and kind of just the traditional ways that we kind of compartmentalize as we're learning and building blocks. But again, that, and you and I both know I love the deconstruction, right? So there's like construction and then the deconstruction, because of like essence and like what is the actual essence, and being willing to learn and be trained in different things, part of like the adolescent young adult journey, and then that returning to and integrating and the transcending that puts it all together so that it feels more alive, which does require a dose of courage and does require letting go of the very linear model that success has tended to like, I would say I didn't want the linear model, but there was something that kind of bought into it, I think, right? Just being
Well,
in
that's
Western
very, yeah, I
culture.
think that's very natural. It's
Yeah.
like, it's a musician, for example, learning how to play the piano, knowing the
Hmm.
chords, knowing the
Of course.
keys, like
Yeah.
learning the basics so that they can then combine it in new and different ways
Yeah.
that make it completely new and creative and never heard of before. And so what you're pointing to is your depth of knowing, which is your wisdom. And
Yeah.
you had that even before the training and the
Yeah.
experience and all of that. But the training and the experience and all of that also allows you to be that much more effective and skillful and graceful and all the
Yeah.
things. But at the end of the day, there is this like sense and sensory of knowing
Hmm.
what's good for us, what we're capable of, that we can show up and create regardless of what ingredients we may or may not have. Like
Yeah.
that, as human beings, we're just creative innovators. So you're going to trust yourself more when you've allowed yourself to keep playing in these new and different ways, regardless of whether you're bringing in your training and your modalities and all the
Yeah.
frameworks that you learned. You may pitch some out, you may bring some back in.
Yeah.
It's like you can pick and choose them.
Yeah.
And so the beauty of that is that your desire, even before you maybe knew it, was the freedom to trust yourself. Like, that's
Hmm.
what you
Yeah.
wanted.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then now on the other side of the work, it's like no matter what you're creating, there is this freedom to trust yourself. Doesn't mean that we
Yeah.
won't bump up against like fear or
Yeah. Of
shadow or
course.
those things, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like you trust yourself to dance with that.
Yeah. Exactly. And that sense of really, I think being an experiential learner, this idea of like really, to me, seeing that, that was the only, that was the way for me, right? This idea of, um, creating something that was my ideal, seeing where it didn't quite hit, and kind of having to that, seeing that that actually had some grief for me because there was a lot of purpose, there was a lot of passion, and then being like, oh, okay, this is great for you. Like, of course, again, retrospectively, this is great. And now, of course, it's when I feel more intense feelings that the older Amber might have been like, oh, this is going to be negative. I'm like, oh, this is like, what's on the other side, right? That kind of like, oh, this is going to be
Yeah.
actually good for me, right? Which,
That's
when
juicy.
you're avoidant about some of that stuff, you're like, nope, I'm only here for the positive parts of life, right? It really
Yeah.
dampens the true joy and the true, like,
Yeah.
again, peace. I think, inner peace, inner trust, all of those things go with freedom that we can sometimes misconstrue is the externals. And so I think it was really good for me because there was like, I had a lot of external freedom when I met you. I had more as I was making more and not working more hours, but there was still, I'm sure you felt like my inner kind of trappings that was
Mhm.
like, and so that was like hell or high water that has to be explored because
Yeah.
I have externally a lot of freedom
Mhm.
and not a lot to complain about. So that means there's an inner working that is really important for that again, that lifestyle of creative freedom that I think
To
we're
be
talking
able to
about.
enjoy the freedom.
To be enjoy the freedom, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
really, and then and really letting go of any of that perfectionistic kind of worldview, but still having the capacity to really love your creations, have precision that you want, that like really dancing with that, which I think
Yeah.
is very much why I chose an artist as the leader, because that to me is very much a creative behavior versus a scientific or strategic only. Not that you and I both don't like science, but again, the
Right.
artistic lens of healing is very interesting to me versus
Mhm.
just the scientific lens. And even when I
Yeah.
talk about my clients that are mostly helpers in the kind of traditional fields, this idea of like the art of healing is kind of where most of us need more support versus the science, because that's so noticed in our trainings.
Well, that's how we're conditioned is to see
Yeah.
things through the linear and the seeable and the measurable and the knowable. And then there's this whole other world of mystery and
Yeah.
magic and unknown and unseen and unnameable and all the
Yeah.
things. And so
Exactly.
it's being comfortable with this because they're ultimately looking at the same
Same
things,
thing.
but
Yeah.
science can only science is behind, right? It's always
Yeah.
catching up to show
Uh-huh.
us what's actually happening. And so, yeah, there's just such a beauty in your willingness to dive all the way in there.
I
And,
am willing.
yeah,
That is something I'm
and
willing to do.
yeah, and there was something you said a moment ago, and it may have slipped away. Let's see if it wants to come back. It's very much in the land of like choosing an artist and choosing someone that wants to kind of play in that way. I think that was such a gift for
Yeah.
yourself first and
Uh-huh.
foremost,
Oh, of
but
course.
that allows you to do the work in the world because the women that are attracted to you, the clients that are attracted to you, were also wanting that. And
Yeah.
this goes back to that empathic piece that I was pointing to earlier, where it's like sometimes the hardest thing to give ourselves is the
Mhm.
gift of our own medicine.
Yeah.
And so while it was so easy, like there's no surprise that your practice was full. You didn't even have a website. It's referral based. It's just
Yeah.
like, doing its own thing because you were giving such potent medicine
Yeah.
to
No.
these people. And if we're helping other people and then we're not feeding ourselves in the process,
Yeah.
then that's where we can start to get wonky or,
Yeah.
sideways. And
Yeah. No,
so,
I think that was like I always say I love a hungry heart as a client. And it was like, oh, because you're a hungry heart. Like, the feeling, right? Like, a hungry
yeah.
heart. And so therefore it's, and it's, it's like there's a certain level when that hungry heart, it's right in that magic and mystery part, right? Like that's the stuff
Mm.
that really lights up a heart. It's less of the rational stuff. So of course
Yeah.
I need to give myself that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We get plenty of the rational all day long. It's being
Yeah,
shoved in our face all day, every day. We've grown up for it for 20 years if you did continuing education or higher
yeah, yeah.
education. And so actually giving yourself the gift of dropping into your heart, dropping into your body, trusting it to create regardless of what you can see is
Yeah,
such a beautiful path. And so I'm curious because I know we're kind of
yeah. Like
running towards the hour now. Yeah, just if there's anything else that you want to share, or if you feel like you've really been able to express and articulate your biggest takeaways from our work together. I mean, I know we talked about the externals and the things that you were able to play with, and then there's this inner aspect and the pieces that have completely shifted for you. Do you feel like there's any other major takeaways or things that you want to point to or express?
I was thinking the last time you and I talked as my kind of, kind of closing of one container, was you said to me like there's safety in your caring, and it was so like it was just really poignant to me, just this idea of you really, I think, I mean, you can see that I can feel that right there. I think there was a part of me that was like, oh, I care too much, and then I have to explore a bit of like holding back the caring too much, and it was like in the end, I mean, and you allow me to kind of feel those feelings of like maybe I just don't care about anything. But you really kind of honored that you care so much, and that there's safety in that. Like there's safety in your body, there's safety in the way you feel. And it was really powerful because it was really like, yeah, like I did a whole little writing thing around that because it was really like, yeah, there is like, because again, that safety in being me, safety in trusting that like big hearted feelings and what they what they allow you to access is so beautiful. And simultaneously, there is going to be, you're a human, so there's going to be some pain and heartbreak. But that real, like the bigger heartbreak, of course, is never to let yourself feel all of those feelings. And so I think
Yeah.
we're all up against that as humans, just like to really, really feel how big we are inside is a
Mm.
really, a beautiful gift that it was.
Yeah, I think that's so. Yeah, I really love that you brought that into the conversation because that is a superpower. Like your ability to care that much
Mhm.
is a huge superpower. And
Yeah.
part of the reason that I've done the work that I've done in the world, starting with art, then art therapy, then whatever this thing I do is, it's like expressive arts for entrepreneurs, we'll call it
Yeah.
that, is that the art actually allows a safe space
Yeah.
for that huge care.
Yeah.
And one of the things, and I'm probably going to be doing a live stream or a writing or something on this soon, but it's like one of the things that gets me into the most trouble with myself and my work and the world and everything is when I cut off
Uh-huh.
that safe space. When
Yeah.
I try to, like, my ego gets in and is like, you don't need that anymore. You don't need that art space. You don't need that big space to care. You don't, like, in
Mhm.
a way, it's saying, child, go to your room. Like,
Yeah.
leave the adults alone and, like,
Yeah.
just entertain yourself, but not giving her any toys to entertain herself. Right.
I know.
And so I get into very big trouble, and life gets very black and white when I
Yeah.
do not allow a space. And then if my ego convinces me, but I'm creative digitally, I'm creative online, I'm creative in podcasts. Like, but if I don't give that part of me that wants her hands in the dirt and the finger
Yeah.
paints and the primal, you know, feral
Yeah.
aspect of the soul,
Yeah.
then my work can get very dry. And I
Mhm.
think this, you know this from your work and you know this from the clients that you help. And
Mhm.
this is really ultimately a universal thing. It's just that as big, deep feelers,
Yeah.
it's going to feel even more extreme than
Yeah.
for someone who lives in their analytical full time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the part of, like some of the themes, like the visual themes for me were like the wasteland, the arid, we met in Phoenix and we both would see the beauty of Phoenix, but I was like, I'm living in like where I feel like I'm just, there's not enough moisture in life right now for me. And it's funny, we both moved to very green
Green,
places to be
lush.
like, I need the external component of like, I, we're humans, we need like water is this like, and thus emotions, right? Symbolically, and that lushness and that vitality that I think, you and I both really love. And every time I cut it off, like and I don't have as much room now to cut it off, right? So it's like more and more sensitive to like, what are you doing to yourself? And like taking time for myself. So that again, my body, heart, soul, mind can be the bigger kind of container of the kind of work that really interests me, because I don't think there is enough of that. There is too much kind of superficial stuff. And it's like you can have a lot of the things that superficial people, I don't mean to call it people, but the superficial kind of glitz, you can have some of that, but you can also have it even more so with depth. And so I think again, like a call to needing more depth in the world, and the breadth and the width and all those things, so that you can really enjoy it all, versus just like, again, making a lot of money is fun. It's fun superficially, it's fun depth wise, but it's not enough. And so we just can get distracted if it's not truly that fully lush way of being.
Right. Yeah. And this is like pointing back to that creative lifestyle, right? It's a way of being and living. It's not
Mhm.
just what you make in the world.
Yeah.
And so what you're pointing to is kind of, my brand in a sense is the wealthy creative. It's like, it's not, I don't know what another word is. It's not the money hungry creative. It's
Yeah.
it's like wealth. The root word of wealth is health and well-being.
Yeah.
And so that's the vitality that you're pointing to. And when we have that, and the money is the cherry on top, it's really fun for the money to keep expanding and growing naturally,
Yeah.
versus the sacrifice that a lot of people do in our money driven culture. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's kind of flipping the order of like soul, heart, all the things that allow me to feel joy and nourished now become the fuel for sacred service, sacred
Yeah.
direction, sacred business.
Yeah, and I think too, there's that for me, it was like really, I spent a lot of my creative time too outside, and like really connecting with I am nature. It's not outside of me. And like honoring really how you, when you watch growth with the right environment, right? It's enough sun, water, healthy air, which is, it's fundamentally going to grow.
Yeah.
And so you can really let go of a lot of that force. And so anything I'm doing to constrain my healthy environment and growth is like, that's my work. Not necessarily this a bunch of adding on to it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's
yeah,
the art. It's the art of simplifying. And
yeah,
this is the deconstruction that you were pointing to. It's like the more we shed, the more we take off, the more we simplify, the lighter and easier life is. And it's
yeah,
way more simple than we were conditioned to believe. And
totally more.
so, yeah,
And
there's
also,
what
I think too. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say there's just an art to stripping down too.
Yeah, there is, and I mean, I think that was a lot of what we worked with, and also to me, you also. I mean, I think even before you and I were working, I was doing the sense of like less consumerism. And so in some ways too, you get this natural wealth because you're also not buying things to distract
Mhm.
yourself, right? So your
Yeah.
interests get real pure of what actually where you want to spend your money, which is why I was like, I want to spend money on my growth, not
Yeah.
on distractions, right? Like the
Yeah.
addicted part of you. And so I think you
That's
also
beautiful.
really
Like the
get
way you said
real.
that was really beautiful. Yeah, because you were gifting yourself the gift of transformation
Yeah.
versus distraction to just avoid more
Yeah.
of what you didn't want to feel.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like you really do get almost like an added wealth, like return on investment, because you're also not, you really aren't wasting money the way, again, society says like you never have enough. So you can
Hmm.
kind of pull
Hmm.
out of that whole cycle because you're like, actually, I have enough for what I want. And
Hmm.
even when numbers change, which I went through numbers changing with business, but it's like, again, the core is like, but my expenses don't go up because I'm not necessarily like searching for something outside of myself, which
Yeah.
again creates that inner wealth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. Beautifully
Yeah.
said.
It's been fun. It was,
Yeah.
I love you. I loved I've always loved your work. I always say like this iteration may be complete, but it's because it's just, again, that sense of like, we have favorites in our lives, and there's a sense of like, I love your work. I love your art.
Mhm. Thank you. Yes. And I love you as well.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you want to add? Anything that if somebody were considering this work that you would want them to know in advance or that you would share with them? And yeah, for anybody interested in Amber's
Sure.
work too, I'd love for you to share where people can find you.
Um, well, again, I think I'm a big fan of mystery. I think if you like unconscious stuff as a therapist, you would like mystery. So to me, the mystery of you, and again, custom work is that to me is just motivating. And so, I'm a big fan of people trusting that if they have a strong draw to somebody's work of art, right? So if they see things that you say, um, I guess it's like, typically how people, and where they get to meet you a little bit, there's a sense of just, again, following breadcrumbs, I think. And so, like, it's funny to me that I heard of you,
Hmm.
you know, and then and met you, and then you reached out and we did like a walk and a walk and talk and I was like, oh, I really just like, I liked that. And it was like almost like I never really thought about coaching, to be honest. I was like, oh, I do deep work with a therapist, it's fine. But I remember being like, oh, this is a different type of relationship. And I like that relational work is primary for her. And I like that depth is primary. Like, so those two
Hmm.
things were my draw. I'm not necessarily somebody who is like, just this and this. I don't typically ask a lot of questions. I just am like, that is the desire. So I am desire driven, and I am somebody who likes mystery and, again, co-creation. Like, so
And you trusted yourself. So that's a
yeah, and I
beautiful
did
thing
trust
to
myself, right? So
see
there's parts of me that
that you
really trusted
already
myself.
trusted yourself, but you wanted to expand your trust muscles
Yeah,
as you were stepping into new, more creative territories. So that was
yeah.
cool for you to.
And then if I would kind of stop trusting myself, like, oh, I want to do this, then there would be a part of you reminding me, like, so what is like the original intent, right? So that was helpful. Yeah, so I would just say, like, there's generally, to me, you want somebody who has depth, and you want somebody who does different types of interventions, and that it's a lifestyle exploration. It's not just a business
Business.
or
Yeah.
creativity only. It's the sense of like
Or
a
relationship only.
holistic, yeah, like, so,
Yeah.
and similar to me, like, I think I just love holistic work, because whatever the kind of, if you want to say, chief complaint is what they say medically, like, what is the why people come in, you always know that there's all the facets around what that struggle is. And so it's sometimes, pleasure oriented, and it's sometimes pain avoidant, but either way it's going to hit all the facets. So you want, like, I just wanted somebody who likes the multidimensional,
Yeah.
as like
Absolutely.
somebody who I work with, versus,
Yeah.
this is the one thing we'll work on.
Yeah.
I
Thank you.
guess
Thank
my
you for
thoughts are, I
saying that.
expect that. I expect
Yeah.
for higher level work that there's multifaceted, and it doesn't mean I think you have to be an expert at everything, but the way that I've always felt like I could talk to engineers and not know how to do engineering, but the way
Sure.
I think and kind of explore the situation is that it is helpful. I don't have to know the field. So
Well,
I
yeah,
think that's
because
kind
I
of how
see
you
the
work too.
energetic. Yeah, I see the energetic patterns, and the way you
Yes,
do one thing is the way you do everything. So, whatever you're doing in your business, you're also doing in your relationship. What you're doing in
of
your
course. Yeah.
relationship, you're also doing to yourself and your health
Yes,
and whatever else. So, if there's a restrictive pattern, it's across the
everywhere.
board.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and that's a much faster way to say it. Yes, it is energetically, you're seeing it. And so if you have trust that this is the person you want to work with, and you have trust that there's a component of they can see some things that you can't see, then that gets to be a really fun experiment or art.
And it's even and that's where the trust piece comes in, because you know, you could do an experiment that just turns into complete mud, right? Like
Yeah,
if we're combining red and green color experiment, mud is your, and that might
sure.
not be a desired outcome. However, if there is this embedded trust that I'm following the breadcrumbs because I know each time I leap into the unknown, I'm also expanding. I'm also
Yeah,
growing. I might not know exactly what the outcome is, but I know it's growth and expansion because I've set the intention for growth and
yeah,
expansion.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And
So I
also,
love,
I think, sorry, you can go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, so I love that you see that, and that it doesn't have to be locked into this has to happen, this has to happen, this has to happen.
No, yeah, I'm just, that's not my person. I think I would be more disappointed. And so therefore, for me, it's really important that like you have some level of mystery, and you can be sure that the unconscious will go was going to lead you somewhere. That's just that part of
Yeah.
me. I think that I think that way and trust that. And I also felt like if it looks muddy, that I'm not by myself, like trying to problem solve, because there was definitely some mud, but it wasn't
Yeah.
like you would say, like, if I'm kind of digging in, you're like, do you want to pull back there, Amber? Like, that's part of me that's like,
Reflective distance. It's
yeah,
like
it's
the
like
most
reminding.
popular term in my household.
Exactly.
Like,
And
because I
it's
use it so often that my partner's like, reflective distance.
yeah. What I think too is like, even if you're trained, like you and I are trained similarly, but it's like it's hard to do it for yourself. It just
Oh, of
is.
course.
So
Oh,
that's
yeah.
why
Not,
to
it's
me, like you,
impossible.
yeah, you want somebody who's, I remember telling you once, I was like, I love that you reminded me that pain is not always punitive. Like sometimes that if that was all I got out of this last year, I'm cool. Of course I got more. But again, it was like, how many times do I want to because I'm not seeing it, it's not ingrained in me yet. It's not part of me yet. And so that part of just, I guess to me, it's like if you want to have an enjoyable life, having kind of partners by your side in exploration is just more fun.
Absolutely. Yeah,
It's more fun. And if you
absolutely.
can view it as exploration, I find that also more fun for me as an exploration. And again, like, yeah, my intent is I know that I have lots of capacity to be successful in my way, and I want to be successful, multifaceted with the parts that I don't see. And so that's just again why I chose what I chose. Just to
Yeah.
see,
And I
of
think
course,
that
I can grow
there's
with more support.
absolutely, I think there was something you said in there around having partners at your side just makes it more fun. I think what you're pointing to is hiring people that do embody qualities that you desire to
Yeah.
embody, because that's ultimately what's happening there. It's like
Hmm.
we're not just exploring for the sake of exploring, we're
Yeah.
exploring and excavating the
Hmm.
aspects of self that are saying, I can't have what she has. I
Yep.
can't be creative, or I can't write, or I can't do
Yeah.
coaching instead of there, whatever the story is. It's
Sure.
like, okay, cool. I hear the shadows, I hear the stories, I hear the limitations. I'm leaping because I want to be done with those stories. And I'm
Yeah.
leaping with someone who's already done it in a
Yes,
sense.
exactly. Yeah, you're correct. Exactly. That sense of like you had components of embodiment that I did not have, and I enjoyed your personality and like not more than your personality, obviously, as I got to know you, but and so this sense of like, yeah, this is going to be an exploratory, enjoyable life. Oh, and she has the capacity to hold when it feels hard. Like that's important too. Like it's not just somebody who can, have fun, but also has it all so that you can have, sadness and joy on the other side. And so yeah, I find like there's a part of you that you have, I do think that you have a component of you enjoy the mystery too, because it's like we can have a vision and we have to be able to expand that it may be even more enjoyable
The
than,
vision can change, like
of
an
course.
intuitive painting, it might
Yeah.
start out hot pink, and then before you know it, it's blood orange,
Yeah.
but but it's the discovery
Yeah.
of that
Yeah.
that's such a beautiful experience. Well,
Yeah.
thank
And
you so much for sharing all of that.
yeah,
Yeah,
of course.
I feel like this is just a really beautiful discussion. And I couldn't help but look and see that it says Amber Panay Posey, the Creative RX.
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful little
I,
stamp, if you will, of how far you've come from our first, you call it a walk and talk, but our first
uh,
hike of like, I want to be creative. I want to have a creative business. I want more creativity. And then here
yeah.
you are, the Creative
I
RX is
know. It's
just
like
such a
fun.
gorgeous full circle moment.
It really, yeah, it really is. It's true. This idea of like honoring that, like, it, yeah, honoring this background of like prescribing and all that, and just being like, yeah, in the end, it's all about, really can we be as creative and kind of play within that. It's like the best of both worlds. So yeah, and so my website is not the Creative RX. It's the
Okay.
focus. It's the focused path. And you have my website, I guess, if you want to put it at the
Yeah,
bottom.
I'll add it to the description.
Yeah, and much like Lainey, I love kind of depth work and a sense of, I call it the cocoon, as this really soft place to land, and the crucible of kind of when you're in those stages of ready to grow a little bit more, just because I think sometimes there's a little bit more of that shedding process and slowing down, and then sometimes that movement. And we can obviously do them both at the same time, but I know for me, I struggled a little bit of like, I always thought I was on the
Ascension.
ascent. And I was like,
Yes.
there's a deeper descent going on here that I, need to really honor. And so just that ability of descent and ascent, that's kind of what's the primary one that you're led to right now. And yeah, just like the holistic health of a human. And I do love entrepreneurs, much like you. I think it's such a fun journey to work with people who are in helping professions of any sort, where heart led and wanting to be of service and not burn out.
Yeah. And to feed yourself while
To
you're
feed
doing
yourself.
that.
Yes, and enjoying, and also much like you, I'm not afraid of money talk, because I always think like money's fun. There's no evil with money. Let's make sure we have enough money to give ourselves the life that we want. Like, it's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
Well,
thank
it's
you
so
so
good to
much.
see you. And thank you for
I
sharing your
know.
journey. And I'll be sure and share the replay with you. And yeah,
Okay.
I'm so looking forward to sharing this with my people. And
Yeah, me too. I'll
yes,
share it as well.